This is hands down the best tune for the N20 engine, but it's not from who you think it is. And although tuning platforms have been around for this engine for a long time, they don't really consider the two main issues that prevent these turbocharged BMWs from having reliable power. Those two big issues being heat and plastics, because after enough heat cycles, those plastics will deteriorate. We all know the horror stories of the charge pipe. In my case, the turbo inlet pipe went bad first and it completely sheared off. But it's even worse in these N20 engines because they have the plastic timing chain guide. It was so bad that BMW had to recall certain models in order to replace them. And when it came time for the LCI models, they had to change the material and design in order to beef them up in order to prevent that catastrophic engine failure. Now, BMW did try to clean this up in 2015. So a good rule of thumb here is that if you have a 2016 model and up, you should be fine. But if you do happen to hear that very distinctive sound, that is your warning to shut off the engine and have it towed to your mechanic. But those two other plastic components, the turbo inlet pipe and charge pipe, I do recommend doing on your own because you are going to save a lot of money here. Now, if you're one of the lucky few to inspect these two pieces and they come back perfectly fine, you could proceed forward with the tune and just wait for them to break. It's not what I would recommend, but you could proceed forward with the tune. Because when you pair it with the rest of our pre-tuned checklist and BimmerTech's ability to safely reduce our operating temperatures, these pieces in theory should be less prone to breaking. And here we have the rest of our pre-tuned checklist with a small disclaimer. If you've recently done any of these services, there's no need to do them again before you get the tune. But if you're approaching that 70% mark of any of these intervals, go ahead and swap it out for some fresh new oil, along with a filter or coolant if you need it, as well as spark plugs, which BimmerTech for their Awaken tune doesn't require a specific brand or gap. So just go ahead and follow the OEM settings, and if you want, you can get the OEM plugs. But NGK has never let me down. And of course, the last thing that you need on our pre-tuned checklist is the discount code, which is also going to include the coding cable that you need for your laptop to communicate to the car. And now that you have your coding cable in hand, you can schedule your appointment on BimmerTech's website. And you will need a Windows laptop for the coding session. Sorry, Mac users, but don't worry because that includes me too. I just ended up borrowing my friend's laptop, and other than downloading the required materials, BimmerTech handles everything during the coding session. But it is a pretty long coding session, so you will want to hook your car up to a battery tender. Then from there, just answer the questions in chat, like if you have an upgraded intercooler and what type of gas you use. Because the tune is optimized for 93, but if you live in an area where only 91 is available, then they do need to know that. And if you live in a state like Arizona, California, and Nevada, then that's something that they also need to know because those three states have a slightly different 91 than the rest of the states. During the coding session, you will be asked to turn the car on and off repeatedly, so make sure that you're working in a well-ventilated area. In some cases, they will ask you to come back for a second coding session, so it might not seem like anything really happened on the first go-around, but what really happened is that they pulled information from your car to learn what the actual parameters are, to learn what's on the car and what's going to go into the car. That way they can go back to the drawing board to draft you up a custom tune specific for your car and driving habits. And then on the second session, that's where you're gonna realize all the potential that your car has to offer. So of course, you're gonna realize a bump in power and a more linear pedal response, especially on the low end, which these cars really lack. But you're also getting reliable power. Because from my understanding, BimmerTech is reducing the overall running temperatures without sacrificing the optimal running temperatures, meaning that they're cutting out all the excess heat by activating the radiator fan sooner and optimizing the air-fuel ratio based off the information that you gave them, thereby helping them eliminate engine knock completely. Now, when you jump in the car for the first time and start it up, you're not really going to notice anything different because everything's pretty much going to happen and sound the same. It's not until you let on the gas that you notice the big difference. That sort of latency, dead space area that we had with the gas pedal in the very beginning is pretty much gone. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to throw you in the back of your seat, but it's very proportional to how much pressure you apply to the pedal. If you go a little bit on the pedal, the car's going to go a little bit, which we didn't even have before. And this is super important when you're trying to accelerate from a red light or from a metering light and you're trying to catch up to freeway speeds. And this linear response with the pedal is very consistent throughout the entire range. So when you're kind of getting up there in freeway speeds and you're trying to navigate onto the freeway as cars are coming off, you're able to pass up the slower traffic in order to get to the lane that you want. And this is also going to be very good for any situations that you might incur down the road. Now, this isn't going to make the car perform something like the M235i that I have, because we do have to keep in mind that this is a 4-cylinder engine and that is a 6-cylinder. But this is definitely enough for somebody who uses their car as a daily, and definitely enough for my dad since he's going to be the one that's primarily driving this car. Now for the thing that impressed me the most, downshifting. The ability to downshift at a more regular pace in this car has been almost impossible. I've had to do it at a very slow and mediocre pace in order to make sure that the engine and transmission are at respectable speeds to each other so that there's not a huge spike in the RPMs. But I do believe that if you have an automatic transmission, BimmerTech can tune that in order to make it a little bit more aggressive or at least compatible with whatever mods that you have as well as the gasoline that you have going into your car. But since this is a manual transmission, they weren't able to do that. So I was really impressed when I realized that I can go at a regular pace rather than my kind of slow down molasses pace that I normally go in with this car that I don't have to do with the M235i. And this is for basic downshifts, so nothing fancy like rev matching. Say for example, you're coming up to a red light, or if you want to take a turn and you need to go to a lower gear, something like that where you just want to slow down the car. And last but not least, especially in the wallet category, is the MPGs. Normally in this car, I was able to get 19 to 20 miles per gallon, depending on the traffic. But since we've tuned the car, I've been able to get 21 miles per gallon on this car very regularly. It's not earth-breaking, but considering the prices of gas right now, I'll take whatever I can get. The last thing to keep in mind here is that this is the stage 1 version of the Awaken tune. In order to go to stage 2, you will need the upgraded intercooler, but if you already have one, or if you want to get the most out of your stage 1 tune, I would highly recommend upgrading the intake. This is going to make the car even more responsive across the entire range, but especially at the low end. To see which one's the best and probably the cheapest, check out this video, and I'll see you in that one.